All right, the immortal John Hancock here, and I am so honored to have three very special guests with me. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to introduce David Crane, Gary, and Dan Kitchen of Audacity Games, but they have a long, legendary background in the gaming industry. I'm speaking with people I've looked up to my whole gaming life. It is such an honor to have all three of you on this channel, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk about your new endeavor, Audacity Games. And so take it away. Just a little background about about yourself. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, John, for having us on. Dave, why don't you go first on the background?
Yeah, I'm the oldest, so I guess I get to start. I started in this video game business in 1977, working at Atari with Nolan Bushnell. So that's how far back I go. And I'm a co-founder of Activision. Many people know the story, but in 1979, four of us spun off of Atari and created Activision. Activision was the first third-party publisher of video game cartridges. At the time, Atari made cartridges for their Atari system, and Mattel made cartridges for the Intellivision system, and so on. Those were first-party publishers. We became the first third-party who said, we don't need to have a console to make software. And also at Atari, we were not being credited for our work, and it's very creative work. We should be credited just like an author. Yeah. And so one of the founding principles of Activision was to credit the designers with their creative work, just like you would an author of a book. And since that start way back when, I have published close to 100 games on 25 different consoles and systems. I've programmed in more than 24 computer programming languages along the way, because everything changes every couple of years. And anyway, so along the way, I met these guys.
All right. So Dan and I were in New Jersey. Dan is still in New Jersey. I have since at one point relocated to California. That's why Dave and I are together here, and Dan is on the East Coast. Dan and I were working in electronics in the late 1970s together at a company, and I reverse engineered the Atari 2600. So I went out and bought one, I ripped it apart, figured out how it worked, figured out how to write code for it, and did a game called Space Jockey.
All right.
1979 timeframe. We were well aware of these guys on the other coast, Activision. So after I finished Space Jockey, we left the company we were working for to go out on our own. And I picked up the phone and I called the main Activision number because we really admired the work they were doing, because they were doing the best games on the platform. I asked for product development, and I got a gentleman named Tom Lopez, vice president. And I said to him, we're in New Jersey. We program 2,600 games, wondering if you want to work together. And he said, no, you don't. Said the only people who program 2,600 games are here or a few miles away at Atari. And I said, no. I said, I reverse engineered it. Right now I'm working on Donkey Kong for Coleco. And he said, will you be there tomorrow? So
nice.
He flew out, and we joined Activision despite being heavily courted by Atari at the same time. We ended up joining Activision, opening the first satellite design office in New Jersey in 1982, called the Eastern Design Center. It was Dan and I, John Van Ryzen, who did Hero, and a few other people. And we've worked with Dave pretty much ever since in a number of different companies, and that brought us all the way up here to Audacity. Dan?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Through my career, I've worked many years with Gary and Dave, and went off and did some work for a few other video game publishers, had my hand in a lot of Nintendo Game Boy and Game Boy Advance and DS games, and even a few Nintendo Switch titles. But we've always loved working together. So we've always had a love for Atari 2600 and the games of that we've created. So in the real retro boom that's going on, it kind of made sense for us to return to our first love and to return to working together.
Well, and as you know, John, we go to a lot of the trade shows, the consumer shows. As you said, we met you in Portland, and we've been to a number of the Portland shows. And we always would hear last few years the same thing from all the fans. Why don't you guys write a game? You guys should write a game.
Absolutely.
And we have day jobs and we didn't have time. But about 3 years ago, Dave and I talked about it and said, let's just start doing one and see where it goes. Dan on the East Coast, we told him about what we were doing, and he started independently working on what we now refer to as Casey's Gold. And we weren't sure we'd ever finish it because we had other obligations, but we kept working on it. And we weren't going to announce a company or talk about a product or a ship date until it was done. We wanted it to be done, and we got it finished, was tested, cleared for manufacturing, and then in early March. And in that time frame, Dan had spoken a lot about Casey's Gold, had tremendous excitement in the community. So we went to Dan and said, "You've done a great job paving the way. Why don't we combine efforts? Because we have a game that's almost done." And Dan has all the contacts and the mailing list and all the work he's done promoting the idea of Activision level designers doing 2600 games. So we came together as equal partners and founded Audacity, with our first product being Circus Convoy.
Which is right here, which
Yep.
is amazing.
There you go.
Absolutely amazing. And just blown away by really the thought and effort into the entire package. And so I know have put a lot of love and passion into this company, this new endeavor. And once you folks, and it doesn't matter who starts, but once you tell me a little bit about Circus Convoy, for those, it's very unique. There's a lot in this Atari game. I think when people think about Atari 2600, they don't realize the capabilities of the console, but you have to know the ins and outs. And you folks have unlocked a lot of potential in the 2600. This is simply an amazing 2600 game. I'm blown away by the detail and the thought into the gameplay. Just what have I played? So go ahead and tell us about it.
Well, to start, there were two paramount issues in our minds. One was, if we're coming back to do this, it's going to be a great game. And in fact, we made the decision not to use any hardware acceleration, which you'll see in a lot of places, because we wanted to create one of the top 5 games ever made on the Atari. And because we're using the same technology that we had in 1982 or thereabouts, you can compare our game to every game you've ever played. If you're comparing it to hardware accelerated games, they're all different. Don't compare it to Pitfall 2 either, because that had a chip in it. But the other thing that was of paramount importance was that we did it in quality equal to or better than Activision in the 1980s. That box that you have in your hand is every bit as well made.
Oh yeah.
With the marketing materials, the fun stuff inside,
the goodies.
And it is, it's 1982 all over again, in the quality of our company. So a lot of that last 3 years was done creating the company, creating the capability to do all this sort of thing. And the game was being done in parallel at the same time.
Yeah, I'm blown away by the quality. I mean, the manual, second to none, the box, the poster.
Yeah.
Gotta love the poster.
All the goodies that people loved back in the 80s. We said, if we're not going to do it as good or better than then we shouldn't do it at all.
And you're hanging on right there to a collector edition copy.
Mm-hmm.
Collector edition has a security hologram on the front of the box that matches the security hologram on your certificate of authenticity. And each game is custom manufactured to order. So that game was made specifically for you with the serial number embedded in the ROM and some other cryptographic stuff so that you can actually submit your high score and it knows it's you.
Yes.
So just as an aside, when people are asking, we're shipping out every day and people are asking, where's my game? Where's my game? Well, they're handmade. They're being packed by a group of volunteer manufacturers helping us all out. And so we're shipping them out as quickly as we can. But remember that they are hand tailored to you to order.
And on that subject, I'm not sure when this is going to broadcast, but as of today, I would say we've shipped maybe 35 or 40% of the orders. About 35% of the orders, I think.
Very
so
cool.
People were saying, when are you shipping? When are you shipping? Quite a few have gone out in the past few days, and quite a few will go out this weekend. And I would guess that we would probably be caught up by the end of next week.
That's the plan.
That's just I'm just blown away by what I've played so far. It's just simply it's just I just tried to just appreciate every moment of it. It's like people don't realize, for those that haven't coded themselves, how difficult it is to make anything for the 2600, let alone some of the special effects. The length of this game is significant, and so I really just think, tell me about that. Tell me what inspired you to do like a Circus Convoy. Was it something in real life? Was it something you've always wanted to do? Was it a game that goes back to something that you didn't finish at Activision? Tell me more about that.
Well, if you haven't done this, you don't understand. But I mean, like, ask us that if you talk about A Boy and His Blob later in this video, ask us about that, how it started out because of it's got the strangest storyline of any video game ever made. But you basically come up with a general concept, and we wanted to do screen to screen. We decided we'd do it on a moving truck, and it became, so it's part adventure. But not everybody likes adventures where they're searching around, trying to find everything. So if you find the right keys, you can unlock the sideshows. And each sideshow is every bit as good as an Atari 2600 game from the 1980s. If we were doing it as a standalone game, we would have made it longer and more levels and that sort of thing. But all of the gameplay is in there. So you actually get action gameplay inside an adventure game. And then what the heck, why not just put resource allocation in there as well? So you have an inventory you can pull up from the bottom, and you can decide whether I'm going to try to use this here or this there. And there's a lot of surprises of, I can use this in a way I didn't realize I could use this. Things that you have to learn to get the best score. So they grow. They grow and they build, and then Gary and I will look at each other and say, it's really still not deep enough to be our first game back after 35 years.
Yeah, there was a lot of that over the last 3 years. 3 years to do that game. And there was a lot of, it needs more. Well, we need to do more. We need to extend this. It needs to be deeper. Yeah, we had a bar that we had set in our own minds of what it needed to be. And the art, so many of those objects went through just dozens of reworks to make them be just as good as you could possibly do on the platform.
Yeah, on the 2600, sometimes you put in an object not because you really wanted to put that object in, but because once you drew it, it was recognizable.
Which most objects aren't.
In 8 bits. You only got 8 pixels, right? So sometimes you'll try to draw something and you'll have to tell people what it is. And so you don't put that in the game.
We had an object in the game for probably a year and a half it rode on the top of the trucks, and it was an object you avoided. And, one day someone in my family or Dave's family saw it and said, "What the hell is that?" And we both stepped back and looked at it and said, that's not recognizable. And we just killed it, replaced it with something else.
Right. Right. So you have like some really interesting features. Like you have a QR code built into the game where you could at any point pause the game and open up a guide to help you with the game, as well as some other a really unique inventory system. And I really thought that was an exceptional feature. There's lots of different items in the game. From what I played so far, I think that's just really impressive, and it keeps track for speedrunners out there. It keeps track of your time, but it also differentiates between a digital copy and a physical release, and I really like that. You folks definitely had thought about a lot of things here.
Yep.
And I really like that additional feature. I was playing it on a digital copy yesterday from my original release, but yeah, there's some significant, impressive things built into this. You've really thought about lots of things, but you also are, it's not just this game, but you're thinking on a with Audacity Games, kind of a broader scale here. You're offering soon cartridges and PCB boards for people out there that want to make their own games. Like that's tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I looked 3 years ago and I said, well, if I'm going to build a business around making games, where am I going to get a cartridge? And looked around to see if anybody had done it, and no. So we had to go to the expense and time of having a 3D model made and an injection molding process, and send it out to China for the mold to be made and games to be made. And if we're going to go to all that effort, I thought back to a few years ago when I was looking on the internet and I said, boy, there's nothing out there for the homebrew people to make a few games. We're not intending that you're going to start up a business that competes with us, but if you are a homebrew guy and you've made a game and you want to make a dozen of them and sell them or give them to your friends, we want to be there to help. Right now, they're not on sale because we don't know if we still need everything we've got before we go back to get another order from China. But once we have a surplus, we just want to support the homebrew business as well.
Awesome. And not the only game. So Circus Convoy is now, but in a few months we got Casey's Gold.
Yep, coming in behind it. That's right.
All right. Tell me more a little bit about Casey's Gold.
Oh, Casey's Gold was it actually came from a concept I had at Activision in 1983, right before the big video game crash. Gary's Keystone Gapers game was a hit, and after Crackpots, I wanted to play around with a little guy who ran around a train. I love old locomotives and steam trains, so I put up a train display, and I think one day Gary in the lab said, well, why don't you put Keystone Kelly on there? And I did, and I was working on a little bit of a game, and then the video game crash happened, and we kind of put away our Activision 2600 games. And that one I happened to make a ROM of and brought home and lost it for 35 or so years until cleaning out my offsite storage about 3 years ago. And lo and behold, there's the cartridge. And so Gary and Dave had told me that they were playing with the 2600, and I thought, well, what if I finally get a chance to finish what would be Keystone 2. I didn't have the rights to Keystone 2, so I called the game for a while Gold Rush, and started creating this little conductor character on top of a train. We've since changed the name to Casey's Gold, and that will be kind of an old style platform game, very much like what Gary had done in Keystone Capers 1. In this case, you're wandering along a train looking for lost gold bars, and you've got to circumvent all these different characters and enemies, and eventually bring all the gold back up to the gold car, and then the train will slow down, and you finish level 1, and now we'll have multiple levels with different types of train cars that are being pulled.
I mean, I've seen some footage when it first was released. I was just like, oh my goodness. I mean, it's got, and apologize if I'm not using the proper term, the parallax scrolling. Is that correct? Parallax scrolling on a 2600. It's like, oh my goodness.
Right.
I was impressed with that. I mean, when I first saw it, but I know it's evolved since then, but I'm really looking forward to seeing that. It looks like a great game to play, in these platform games, for me growing up with the 2600, I was satisfied at the time with single screen 2600 games. And so to take that and to move it to a smooth scrolling game on the platform with all these, with the inventory system and a inventory items and all this additional features, it's progressed so much. And a lot of that is because you folks are experts at programming and have really captured, really squeezed anything the 2600 was capable of doing. I just am blown away. I just want to say thank you so much that your hard efforts and work are going to be enjoyed by thousands of people, and that, and countless, probably millions of people have played your games over the years. And I just want to say that's such enjoyment that you bring a little bit of light to people's lives at a time that they need it. So thank you so much. Really.
Yeah, honestly, there are other ways for us with our talents to make a living, but this one's close to our heart, and it's something we knew the community would be incredibly excited about. And we like the challenge of seeing how far we could push the platform. Nobody's going to drive Ferraris off it. The market's not that big, but that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because of all the excitement we get from the community back, all the Twitter and Facebook and Instagram posts where people are just blown away. We're just glad that we can bring some excitement to the retro community.
So let's talk a little bit about after Casey's Gold. Do you have any public plans that you can say? Are you going to stick with the 2600, or is that to be determined? Are you going to, do you have a time when the next announcement's going to come on what's after Casey's Gold, or is that down the road?
Well, we don't have anything scheduled yet to announce. We definitely have a lot more we can do on the 2600. We are in some discussions with old school game people from the old days, who you see at those retro shows. So if you want to see a game from any of those guys, start pestering them to come and put it on our platform. Happy to do that. But philosophically, I think the thing that has bothered me the most about the way the video game business has gone is it's gone to digital download, and you don't have a cartridge or a box to hold in your hands anymore, to collect, to put on the shelf. So really one of our fundamental principles is making games that you can collect physically. And if your iOS changes and you can't play that game anymore, it's lost forever. If a website goes down that has games you've been playing on it, they're lost forever. But these games, as long as you have a working console, or of course emulators, which do work, you'll be able to continue to play our games, and that's really a goal. So, other consoles that have cartridges will definitely be in the future.
Very cool.
One of the challenges for us is we're not homebrew. We're a real company.
Yes.
And we are, if we do things on other historical platforms, we're going to make sure that we do them within the copyrights that exist. Like, for example, we've done many, many games over the years for Nintendo. We would not approach doing an NES game or a Super NES game without including Nintendo as a partner. So we're not just going to run off and go on platforms without making sure that it's something that we have the legal right to do.
You're a licensed publisher.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's important to know that process is involved. Yes. It's not something you can just do a handshake and be done. And so that's the difference between, really when you were talking that you are a legitimate company doing things on a professional scale. And that is a difference. This isn't someone, this isn't a company that's, just making a one-off. This is involved. This is a long-term plan, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what else you folks release, and looking forward to playing more of Circus Convoy. Okay, so future plans. All right, so now's the time for interesting stories. We have some time, or before I start there, what are some things, anything else that you would like to say to fans or viewers that have that are looking forward to Audacity games or your previous backlog? What is there anything else that you would like to say, any one of you, about what you're currently doing?
Well, we're going to stick to the highest quality possible. Nothing we do is going to be second class. We're not going to put out games that aren't done. We're not going to announce games before they're finished. We're not going to end up doing black and white manuals and recycled cartridge plastic. Everything we do is going to be of top quality. That means we may do less product releases than people would like to see, but we want the fans to know that when we announce a game, it's not vaporware. And when we ship it, they're going to be delighted by it because it's going to be great. I read something the other day. One of the news articles that came out about it was they called what we were doing a bold plan, that who else would be nuts enough to go back and do this level of quality, both from a, packaging and marketing and from a game standpoint, on a 40-year-old, 50-year-old platform. But, I like to think we're bold, and I'm hoping that we're not the last to do it, and that we can do it on other platforms and build at least a sustainable business.
Yeah, and I think, one thing that's kind of overlooked is the QR technology that Dave and Gary put into the system. I mean, it's very cool that we are going back in time to the 80s to make games that we loved to do then, but they have brought the console up to the 21st century.
Absolutely.
By being able to involve your cell phone, your mobile phone, to get, state-of-the-art real-time guides as to what's in the game. I'm sure future games, we may use that to show stories of what's in the game at a certain point, or connect it to very interesting things that we've experienced. And it really, I think, would be interesting for the current player, not just the retro player, to kind of see how the modern technology is being used with the Atari 2600 seamlessly. And I think that's something that is somewhat maybe glazed over a little. Hey, you can, get a patch when you go to the high score screen, but to do it through a mobile phone, and it opens up a real cool possibilities of what we can do in the future with games connected through your mobile phone and the information we can provide you. So I think that's just something that hopefully the retro players and the non-retro players will see for the brilliant stroke that it is.
And just to correct something Dan said, I was not involved in creating a QR.
Oh, that's cool.
That was all Dave.
All Dave, yes.
And Dave told me it was one of the easiest things he ever did. He knocked it out in an hour. Right, Dave?
Yes. Dave likes to do the impossible.
That was the single hardest thing I've ever done on an 8-bit microprocessor. The QR code has an embedded Reed-Solomon error correction scheme that requires calculating a 22-term polynomial divide. Do that in 8 bits.
It was insanity, John. It was insanity to even try it.
Yes. But you have someone with you that can pull it off.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Really, what I've seen from your previous work is if you get in your mind you want to do something, you do it.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
We're very stubborn.
Nothing wrong with being stubborn.
Yep.
For decades, if my coworkers wanted me to do something, all they had to do was tell me it couldn't be done.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
but I agree with Dan. That is an unsung feature that is going to give the game such a community feel.
yes.
You can now actually, and I'm hoping our website where you do the posts becomes more than just a high scoreboard. I want to build a community on that site. We're going to be putting up blog, video blog discussions of stories from the designers, and we'll have forums where you can talk among yourself about the game, and I really hope that that becomes a centerpiece of the retro community.
Look forward to promoting it, and there's more. The link will be below to their website and more information about Circus Convoy and Casey's Gold and future plans with possible homebrew materials, labels, PCBs, carts, you name it. And I'm looking forward to really diving into Circus Convoy more. I've played it up to the second sideshow. It's called Sidecar, right? It's called the Sidecar. I got past the giraffe. I kind of paused. I have to tell you, when I saw the giraffe, I stopped, and I'm like, how'd they do that? And I just stopped. I know the game was running. I just stopped. I'm like, that is gorgeous. And then the artwork on the train on the truck.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my goodness, that is gorgeous.
Yeah,
I just had to stop.
Yeah. That was me, and I know how they did it.
The giraffe is one of the most attractive Atari 2600 sprites ever made. And wait till you get into the snake car and see the snake. Although it's in the trailer, so you get
in the trailer.
I saw the snake, but yeah, I'm definitely trying not to like cheat. I've messed up and died quite a bit. And so
I have too.
The slide though, I really like the slide. I did see that on another YouTuber's channel. The slide, the power slide, or whatever.
Yes.
Do you have a name for it? Is it just a slide? Slide
It's
maneuver?
very clever.
That's a really, really cool feature, and that saved my hind a couple times playing it so far. So
I would say the giraffe, I mean, it's a couple of years old now, but I would say the giraffe was the first thing that we put in where we looked at each other and said, we're really doing something special here.
Yeah.
That was the first one that really stood out as we've made some breakthroughs.
Unfortunately, then it became the benchmark.
Yeah.
And then how are you going to challenge yourself now? You
haven't seen the clown yet, probably.
Oh, I haven't seen the clown.
Clown's pretty nice.
Clown's amazing.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to playing it more. And so I definitely want to hear, I have some story. I want to hear some stories. You folks have such a wide and varied, backlog of experience in the industry. And so, feel free. This is a time I love hearing stories on my channel, and people comment about stories of how many games have connected them. So feel free to share an interesting story, each one of you, about something you did. We talked about Boy and His Blob. You can definitely share a story about that. It could be something about, a previous endeavors together, or a challenge when someone said they challenged you to do something and you overcame it. So feel free to speak about a story.
In 120 decades, was 4 decades times 3, 12 decades combined. There are too many stories for me to even know where to start. But you think of one, Gary, that you want to carry?
Well, let's talk about the hysterical project that was A Boy and His Blob. Dave came up with this stunningly brilliant idea, which to any gamer or game designer, all you had to do was see one screen to say, holy cow, this is so cool. So Dave sent us a screen. It was the boy standing next to the blob. I called him up on the phone because we were on opposite coasts at that point. And I said, all right, I'm standing here. What do I do? And he said, push the button. And I tossed the jelly bean, and the blob caught it in his mouth and then morphed into a ladder. And that was it. That's all you need to see. And I said, well, different jelly beans have different flavors, and the flavors are different objects. He said, exactly. I said, okay, I got it. So we had about 6 weeks to get that game done.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. So we wrestled our team together, and we had this one guy who didn't have a huge game background, but he had a tremendous technology background. I mean, this guy, he could have come down in a spaceship for all we know. He was that smart. And we gave him some of the hardest tasks involving compression of data and things like that. We had a big meeting with the company, and we discussed how we're going to crank this out in 5 weeks plus testing. And at the end, he walked over to me as everybody was leaving the room. And he said, can I ask you a question? And I said, yeah. He said, is it normal to make a game of this complexity in 5 weeks? And I just said, no, it's not. But we ended up doing it. And we had to go to Consumer Electronics Show to introduce it on June 3rd, probably in Chicago. And we had our testing department bang on it to make sure that it was bug-free. But like all the other processes that went into that nightmare, everything was kind of compressed, so it wasn't perfect, the process of testing. But we figured we got most of them. Well, we arrived at Chicago the night before the show. Go ahead, Dave. You take it from there.
Well, we set up a development system in our hotel room just in case we needed to make any last changes. See, the reason the schedule was so compressed is it was Absolute's first Nintendo game. And we'd just gotten a license to do Nintendo publishing. Or it's publishing, right?
Right.
Yeah, effectively. And so we were going to put our first game out. And they said, if you didn't have the finished game in our hands by June 6th or whatever the number is, you won't make Christmas. So,
and that's a hard date.
Yes.
June 6th, 5 p.m. Pacific.
Right.
So we went nuts making sure we would get it done for that Christmas. So we had a development system in our hotel room, and Gary and I were there, and one of our testers, and he was playing over there. And he said, "Oh, I found a bug." And Gary and I, we collaborated on this with about half the code in his lap and half the code in my lap. So we would look at each other and say, "That's in your code, so you sit down." And you sit down at the computer and start making the changes, and we'd fix it, and we'd burn a version and send it over to the tester, and he'd play again.
And this is about 7 o'clock at night, the night before CES starts.
So we did that for a number of hours that night, and we'd already been working 20 hours a day just to get this thing to the place it was. And then we woke up the next morning and went out and stood on the show floor demonstrating the game all day from 8 a.m. to 6 or whatever it was. Go back to the hotel room, tester sits down, found another bug. And we basically bug tested literally all night, with one of us kind of snoozing in the corner while the other one was sitting at the computer, just to get the code all ready. And even then, we decided we'd buy an extra day for getting the finished code to Nintendo by...
Yeah, we took an engineer and a development system, and we flew the engineer to Seattle. We shipped an entire development system to a hotel, and he went and camped across the street from Nintendo at a hotel that was directly across the street, so that we had an extra day to fix bugs. As long as we could modem the code to him by, say, 3 in the afternoon, he could burn a ROM and walk across the street and drop it off at Nintendo by 5. And we actually took advantage of that, and it was complete insanity, because at that point, it was probably AOL on a 28.8 modem. Yeah, and it took an hour and a half to send the bits across to them. It was just nuts.
Wow.
But we will always remember that night in the hotel room where I was literally asleep in a chair, and somebody would go, Gary, this is in your code. So I'd open my eyes and get up, drag my ass over to the keyboard, look at it, figure it out. 10 minutes later, I got another one. I go, that's in Dave's code. Then we have to wake Dave up. And this went on the whole night. It was just nuts. It was nuts.
Wow. That is a great story. And just the things that you do to sell a game. Oh. Yep. All right, Dan, you're up.
Oh, there's a lot of them, but I can go back to our first meeting, Dave, and the founders at Activision. We had been flown out to Atari been wined and dined to be asked to join their company, and we came back to New Jersey, and a week later we were flown out to Activision, wined and dined, and we were like fanboys. We had pictures of these guys up in Gary's basement where we programmed and said we wanted to be like them. As a matter of fact, Gary at one point took the Activision had a catalog in the back of their original games with the picture of the 4 founders. And at one point, Gary scribbled our faces over theirs. It was myself, Gary, John Van Ryzen, and another chap, and put it up on the wall and said, we're going to be with them someday. And so we flew out there, and I remember sitting in the rental car and seeing these guys come back from lunch. I think it was their Santa Clara office, maybe at the time. And, oh, there's Dave Crane. there's Bob Whitehead. And we were like starstruck. And we went in to see them and had a very nice meeting. And at one point of the meeting, I think Al Miller was there with Dave. And Al had just put out ice hockey. And Gary mentioned how good I was at ice hockey. And there was a 2600 in the conference room. So Al plugged in the cartridge and pushed the joystick over to me and said, "You want to play?" And
well, he's been challenged to play the game by its designer.
While we're in
an interview,
job interview. Yeah. Talk about a nightmare.
Wow.
I was nervous. I was sweating, and I happen to have a little move as I get the player by the net to be able to sneak the puck in on the edge. And I did that a couple of times, and Al Miller looked at it and said, "How the hell do you do that?" I went on to actually beat him at the job interview. So that was...
And we got the job.
And we got the job, which I don't think was due to that. Maybe due more to Gary's back engineering of the system, but I'm sure my goals kind of helped. So
well, solidified your expertise
in playing the game. Yes.
Yep.
All right. David Crane, Mr. Crane. So you have so many stories. Do you have any story about Pitfall? Do you have any story about or a challenge? Is someone told? What's a story about someone challenging you, saying something can't be done? Do you have a story you want to share about that?
Well, I'll tell you, when I was working on Pitfall, it was pretty clear it was going to be something special. I mean, the idea that you could, in an era where, as you said, most games were single screen. You'd play just two tanks against each other on the single play field. And the idea that you could run off the side of one screen and end up in another, in an almost realistic looking world with a side view like we had, it just meant the sky was the limit. I mean, you run out of the jungle, you run into the city, you run out of the city, run on the dock, jump on a boat. There's any number of things that you could do. And Pitfall was probably not the first, but it's widely considered to be the forerunner of platform games. And last I counted, on the 2600 alone, there were 600 platform games, I think. So it definitely had a lot of ability there. And we knew it while working on it. And so I spent a lot of time to get it just right. But I decided to be kind of a purist. And I said, you know what I'm going to do with Pitfall is I am going to make you have only one life. I mean, you only have one life in real world. Mm-hmm. You're going to play this adventure, and when you die, you start over. And it was actually that way up till 3 days before the code was released.
Wow.
When all of my coworkers came over and practically sat on me and said, "You're not putting that out with only one life." So the next 3 days was spent trying to find enough room in the ROM to do a multi-life scenario. And that's why it's the way it is I figured out how to add hash marks to the score or to the timer so that you could have 2 extras. And then you just dropped Pitfall Harry from the sky and subtracted one of those hash marks. And if you think about it, that's pretty easy. All I have to do is just put him back at a vertical position that's off the screen and let him fall. So anyway, it took those 3 days to find all the bytes to do it and to put in 3 lives. And of course, I can't tell you how many people in the last 40 years have told me, A, how much they loved Pitfall, and B, how hard they found it. Now, I never thought it was all that hard, but imagine how hard it would be if I hadn't put 3 lives in. I mean, honestly, it would not have been the phenomenon that it was. People would have played it. They would have thrown it away. They would have yelled and screamed. And so I'm really glad that at the last minute we put in 3 lives.
I'm glad you added some lives because I'm not the best gamer. I appreciate and I love games but I'll tell you myself, thank you for adding some lives.
Now, you know what's interesting about that? Because it was an afterthought and it wasn't part of the design, there is a flaw caused by that feature. I designed the game to run left to right. That's why he's facing to the right. So you move the stick to the right and you run, jump over the first thing, and then it's designed so that you learn the skills you need to learn in the game on easy screens before they get really hard, right? But if you die while running from the left to the right, you get a new life on the left side of the screen. And now you have to go back over that same obstacle that just killed you. So 3 days after the first one hit the stores, I'm seeing people are running right to left. Now you can still get every treasure going right to left, but if you die on something, your new life starts you past the obstacle that killed you.
Oh,
Yeah.
So it's actually better to run right to left, even though I designed the game to run left to right.
wow. That's a great story.
Yeah, I like that one.
But yeah, it's so awesome for you folks to, it's been a pleasure having you folks on my channel, and thousands of people are going to see you. I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to have this conversation, to hopefully get the word out. If you have not, check out their new website, Audacity Games. The link will be below. It has all the information about what their current projects is, as well as ordering Circus Convoy, their new amazing game. And it really just blows it blows my mind what can be done on the 2600. It's all in that game, and I encourage people to check it out. What else? Any final thoughts or things to say to people before we go?
Well, just to thank the retro community for their support. We did this for you, but you know, if you want to make it a viable company, you need to just keep voting for us, and we'll keep trying to put out games for you.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yep.
All right. I want to thank everybody for tuning into this interview. This is the Immortal John Hancock, and want to thank my special guest for being on here. It is such a privilege. I am a huge fan, and you know, I over the interview, I think I calmed my nerves a bit. still have butterflies, but it is an honor, and thank you so much for your time.
And hopefully, John, we'll see you at the next event.
I will be there, and definitely looking forward to seeing you in person. It has been a great honor. Thank you so much, folks.
Thank you, John.
This is the Immortal John Hancock signing out.